Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, USA Today's NFL Wire site, covering, of course, the Arizona Cardinals. With me as my co-host for our first show of the week, episode 747, is Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site. And man, Seth, the good thing we have some wild stuff going on where we get initial reactions because we thought that we'd have a head coach decision right now, but we don't. So let's lead with the craziest thing that we have seen in this coaching cycle, in that former Carolina Panthers and Washington football commander skins, head coach Ron Rivera, now the general manager over the Cal football in college, interviewed with the Cardinals for a head coaching job. What are the Cardinals doing, man? What are they doing?
Hey, anytime you can hire a 64-year-old in a division full of sub 45-year-olds, you got to do it, man. I mean, there's no question about that. I don't know, man. I'm getting texts from all over the place like, oh, could it just be he's the DC? Well, I mean, there's always that, right? There's always the reality.
That's a possibility. That is true.
But I mean, even in his last 4 years as the head coach of the Washington Commanders, he had two top 5 defenses and 2 bottom 25 defenses. So you're like, so 4 years he finished 2nd and 4th and 3rd and 7th. But then the other 2 years, he finished 22nd and 25th and 32nd and 32nd. And that was his last year as a head coach and a coach in the NFL. And you look at it and it just, he went 4-13. And as a defensive coach, he was just miserable. And you just wonder, like, what is the game plan? Like, his offenses never cracked the top 20 when he was in Washington, not once. His offenses without prime Cam Newton never cracked the top 15 sans one season. It's just it would be a massive departure from all the names and things we've been talking about, outside of the fact that he's been a head coach for 13 years in the NFL, right?
That's the one thing that would make sense, as we talked about last week, is the Cardinals' trend of alternating between having head coaching experience and not having head coaching experience. And it seemed it was going in the direction, as we heard last weekend, that the 3 finalists for the job were essentially Anthony Campanile, who we talked about last week, Raheem Morris, and Mike LaFleur. And we were waiting on Mike LaFleur, and the Rams have lost, but we don't have anything yet. So, but just literally 5 minutes before we got on Tuesday afternoon is when Deanna Rossini, under the radar, there's the text out there, under the radar, Ron Rivera interviewed with the Cardinals. And I don't know what to think of that, because at what point in the process did the Cardinals interview him? Was he one of their initial ones? Now, because he's not in the NFL, they could skirt the virtual part. So if they were looking at him initially, perhaps that might make sense. Just like they brought Raheem Morris in with an in-person interview early on, and I know part of that is to knock out Rooney Rule requirements, is you have to have 2 minority coaches in for in-person interviews, and they did Morris, they brought in Anthony Weaver, and so they've more than done their duty when it comes to that rule. And we can debate the necessity or the efficacy of said rule, but Ron Rivera, while he is an established head coach, is the best way to describe him as a coach whose the game has passed by.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the question. You're talking about a guy that was, 20, what? Where we go here? Sorry about that. 26, 40, and 1 as a head coach with the Washington Commander Skins. And then, before that, he was 76 and 63. But, he his last 2 years in Carolina, he went 12 and 19. He never had back-to-back winning seasons ever as a coach. I mean, it's very hard to coach 13 years in the NFL and never have back-to-back winning seasons. In fact, it's crazy to think, you look at it, 12 and 4, 7, 8 and 1, 15 and 1, losing the Super Bowl 6 and 10, 11 and 5, 7 and 9. Like, yeah, it's just it wasn't like they just weren't good the next year. It was like, oh man, they're not good at all.
And he was also king of the doing barely well enough, but still winning the division there in that NFC South. We remember the 2014 Panthers, who went 7-8-1, and then beat the Cardinals in the worst playoff game anyone ever wanted to see. We've got the Panthers, who didn't want to win, but they were going against Ryan Lindley and the Cardinals. And do you remember back then when we talked about, this is the early years of the show, and the hope that we had about Ryan Lindley when Drew Stanton went down, and we said, I remember when I was recording shows in my closet on one of the shows with you saying, this is not the same Ryan Lindley as when he was a rookie. Oh my gosh, what were we thinking?
Mm-hmm.
What were we thinking?
It's just all about optimism, and it's hard because the reality is stuff like this, right? You look at it and you have a coaching search that, as we're going to talk about, we felt like it was going to be done today. Like, once you kind of got the news on Anthony Campanile, as we'll talk about shortly, you felt like, okay, there's got to be a follow-up that Mike LaFleur is about to be announced as the next Arizona Cardinals head coach. And instead we get a Rossini bomb of, hey, they're interviewing Ron Rivera. And you're like, whoa, what is happening?
This is a wild left turn. So, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, I get Ron Rivera is a quote-unquote leader of men. As a coach, as the ability to lead players, okay, he's good. He's had some great defenses. He's had some great teams. The difference is, and I saw this actually, which was actually a really good point, that Alex Clancy, who does the Locked On Cardinals podcast, he put on Twitter, and it was that the Cardinals did not lack a leader who communicated his message and the players bought into, because the Cardinals bought into Jonathan Gannon and his message. What they were unable to do, what Gannon failed to do, was develop players, get them to make plays to win games. And there were obvious schematic problems that we had issues with game strategy. Ron Rivera is a great leader. Is he any better as a developer or as a scheme guy than Gannon? It might be a mild upgrade, but looking at his inconsistencies in his record, and you go 6 and 10, 7 and 9, like basically his career record of 102, 103 and 2 is on the back of 3 seasons. The 12 and 4 2013 season, the 15 and 1 2015 season, and the 11 and 5 2017 season. And guess what? What do all of those have in common? It's when he had Cam Newton playing at his absolute best. Minus Cam Newton, there is not much you can say about his career. And I for one am taken aback. This would honestly, wouldn't this be the most Cardinals move that they could have made other than just hiring Vance Joseph?
I mean, to be fair, it's probably worse than hiring Vance Joseph because he hasn't even been involved in the NFL the last 2 seasons. So,
man,
it'll be interesting to see how this all gets done.
Yes. Coming up next on the Rise Up Series podcast, the best of our Cardinals talk on the web. Let's talk about what else is happening with the coaching search. That's coming next on Rise Up Red. We're back on the Rise Up Series podcast, the best of our Cardinals talk on the web. Now, maybe we've already talked worst case scenario, but we want to talk worst case scenario for the Cardinals. The report came out today that Anthony Campanile agreed to terms to return as defensive coordinator for the Jacksonville Jaguars, as did Zinski, their offensive coordinator. Now, as we saw we also earlier in the day with Brian Daboll landing in Tennessee, that there's also, it doesn't lock them. They could get a head coaching job. So those type of deals never keep them from then getting head coaching jobs. It would just be a weird look. So while that news came out, normally that sort of thing only would come after the Cardinals have said thanks, but no thanks. And since it was thanks, but no thanks, what we would have expected nearly immediately was a national report of the Cardinals finalizing a deal with Rams offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur, who was flown in Monday night. They went out to dinner. I'm sure they did the whole Steak 44, all that fun stuff. And then they got down to the brass tacks today when it came to negotiations and expectations. The absence of this is, I'm not sure what the right word is. It might be disastrous.
It's worrisome because the reality becomes you're looking at a situation where probably the best candidate remaining for them in Anthony Campanile is, as you said, we're hoping. We have not heard that he pulled out of the job, much like all the guys that have pulled out of the Cleveland Browns job. We have not heard that about Anthony Campanile.
Although, without that, because national reporters will say that. In fact, I think it is to a coach's agent's advantage to communicate that so that it doesn't look like they got passed over. Instead, they're saying, no, thank you. And the laugh to that says that the Cardinals decided not to go with Campanile.
Well, the other interesting aspect of that is the alleged extension happened last night, agreed to the extension last night. So that again goes to.
That was after the meeting because Campanile. No, that was Weaver they had in. So they had already had him in.
Yeah.
And so you would have figured if Campanile was their guy, unless they only liked him if LaFleur, they would have locked him up last week in that interview. So, hey. So what's the worst case scenario then? Campanile, he's out. They said no. LaFleur hasn't come to terms yet. What's then the worst case scenario? Are we then? Is Raheem Morris? Is he the terrible option, or Ron Rivera? Or let's go back to it. Let's go back to Vance Joseph, whose name has disappeared. Although, there's been some of us in our group chat that have speculated that all of the Vance Joseph chatter was more agent generated than anything else. But what happens if it's not Campanile and it's not LaFleur? What do the Cardinals do now? Because with only 3 openings left in the league, what is going to happen? Joe Brady now has been named head coach of the Buffalo Bills, or is agreeing to that. So the Cardinals, you're down to the Cardinals, the Raiders, and the Browns. And the Browns are a disaster right now. And the Raiders are presumably waiting for Clint Kubiak. It's kind of what the feeling is.
Well, and then so the other question becomes, and it's so difficult to tell, right? But so the Cardinals had an Anthony Weaver for a second interview, correct?
They did. He was the one that brought in, and it was a two-part. It was dinner and the meetings. I believe that was Sunday, Monday, or Saturday, Sunday. I can't remember which it was, but they had Weaver in, and then the next day they had they brought in LaFleur last night and today. So,
I mean, this is just going back a little bit to Rivera as we talk about worst case scenarios. Could Rivera be a Rooney Rule like qualifier, and that's why, because maybe they haven't met the Rooney Rule for 2 in-person minority interviews? I'm genuinely asking.
We know, like Raheem Morris, his first, that when he was fired, he had a first-round in-person interview. So They took care of that. Then you had Weaver. Then you have Rivera, and so they've more than met that. So I don't know, or maybe that, like, if we're going to, does Weaver have any connection to Ron Rivera?
Right, and so the question becomes: so the way Rossini put that out there, right? The way that she discussed it, and the questions that we then have in turn, right, are she definitely said for the head coaching vacancy, right? And yes, that's where you and I or fans are like, oh, what? Wait, what? Like, where did this come from? And you look back and you look through it, and there's really, I'm looking now, there's no
connection to Rivera.
There's no connection to Rivera. So I mean, could it have been a defensive coordinator? I don't know. So, like, the worst case scenario, and when you pose this question, it was really interesting to me because I think most fans would have gone Vance Joseph. That's the worst case scenario. And it's like, well, no, it's the Arizona Cardinals, and it can always get worse. And then this Ron Rivera thing comes up.
For both Ron.
And what it got me thinking is this, like, yeah, it felt like the Vance Joseph stuff was definitely agent driven. That did feel, agent driven to an extent. But also, Jess, isn't it reality that a guy like Vance would be a way better hire than a guy like Ron Rivera? It's almost like they played their hand too aggressively, whether it was the Cardinals or the agent, with the Vance Joseph news, because it got out and it just immediately made fans bristle, and they really let it be known, like, we're out if Vance Joseph is the guy. Like, we're done with the Cardinals.
Maybe they're playing chess and they're saying, oh, you think that's bad? Ron Rivera.
Right.
And so it's going to walk it back to Vance.
Well, and that's kind of what my question is it's like, did fans overreact too much, and now it's like Vance doesn't want to come here? Jim Leonard's now the DC, and where did Leonard end up? Gosh, it's escaping me. But Jim Leonard, the guy that was supposed to be the heir apparent to Vance, is gone, and so maybe Vance just stays in Denver, and the Cardinals get stuck with Ron Rivera. and you're like, holy crap, like, what just happened? And so that's what my question is like, fans went overboard on the Vance Joseph is the worst case scenario. And it's like, well, no, I mean, is he a hot, candidate? Probably not, but he also had one of the best defenses in the NFL this year. He also planned a fantastic game plan to give his team a chance to go to the Super Bowl with Jess Root playing quarterback. Like this, like think about that. Like the only touchdown they gave up was a ball that the Patriots got inside their own 20 or inside the Broncos' own 20, excuse me. And now we're like all praying and hoping that Rivera is a defensive coordinator candidate, like because that is literally the worst case scenario. You're talking about a 65-year-old washed out coach who hasn't been in the league, and like he will have been out of the league for 2 full seasons, all of 2024 and all of 2025, and he's supposed to come back in and lead the worst team in the best division in the NFL. Like that's, I mean, genuinely in that case, I'd rather go Anthony Weaver. At least the unknown is something exciting. Like we can be like, yeah, who knows? Maybe he's the next Mike Tomlin, right? Like but instead you're like, oh, let's just run it back with a guy that failed in his last stop under a horrible owner with no quarterback and a bunch of highly drafted defensive players that have never played up to their potential. That'll work this time.
Oh my gosh. I don't like what's next in this coaching search, but that this there's obvious we have some writing to do after recording this show. Oh, what could be worse than Vance Joseph? It could be Ron Rivera, and if it's not Ron Rivera, who might it be? I'm not sure. So Joe Brady, one of their candidates, he's out. I mean, it's down to 3 jobs, like I said. And oddly, not surprisingly enough, look at the 3 franchises who are still looking for a head coach. They're 3 of the most dysfunctional franchises in the league, between the Raiders, the Browns, and the Cardinals.
And it does seem like there's this reality of the Cardinals are going to, or not the Cardinals, sorry, the Raiders are going to end up with Clint Kubiak, right? Like they just have to wait till he's done winning a Super Bowl, and then they'll get Clint Kubiak. And so the Cardinals and the Browns are showing the 2 ends of dysfunction. and like it's just it's crazy that we're at this point. Like I've just never thought that it would get to, oh, they're interviewing Ron Rivera. Like I genuinely, it's blindsiding.
Yeah, I think that's something we're gonna pay attention to over the next little bit and see what evolves from that. And wasn't Rivera also GM in Washington?
Yeah.
So it would be interesting unless he's like, I just want back in the NFL again. I was gone long enough to be forgotten, and so now I'm coming back because I don't think, because he's the type of coach that would have expectations of a final say that he brings along. As much as we scoff at it, because of experience, he would be able to command in some ways that same sort of thing that Sean Payton, personnel decisions. And I don't know if I'd want that. But yeah, coming up next on the Rise of Your podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web. Let's move on. Let's react to what we saw over the weekend on Sunday in the championship games. That's coming up next on Rise of Red. We're back on the Rise of Red podcast, the best our Cardinals Talk on the Web. We now know who is in the Super Bowl. We've got the Patriots and we got the Seahawks. One game, not so fun to watch. The other one was highly entertaining. What did you think of Patriots Broncos?
I thought it was a masterclass by Vance Joseph to keep them in this game. And I thought, obviously early in the whole situation, they did as much as they could with Jarrett Stidham. But at some point, it felt like Stidham the moment was just. And by the way, we've talked about this, and I know they've had a miserable schedule in the sense of like ease, and just kind of getting lucky. And I saw something today that it was like, of the teams they've played, you look at the amount of people that have been their head coaches have been fired, and it's like over half. But what I will say is that the Patriots defense is legit, and they're really good at making sure a quarterback like Jarrett Stidham doesn't beat them. Outside of that, I mean, it was just, it's why there's a push that all games are played in domes, right?
Yeah. Well, it was crazy. It's crazy to see the evolution, because at the end of the game, it looked like one of those old snow games, and it wasn't like that till it was just cold and clear till the fourth quarter, and the score made you think they played the entire game in the snow. But what a mess! What an absolute mess of a game for the Broncos. Like, their defense played out of their minds, but then to have Will Lutz say after the game that, on the last field goal attempt that they lined up probably a yard, maybe two short. Like, can you not do math?
Like, I know, right? Well, and they'll be like, well, we couldn't see the lines. It's like, you've been doing this so long. Can't you just kind of gauge where it was?
It's like, I don't understand that at all. But 4 missed kicks. I mean, say what you want. What the Patriots did this year was fantastic. To go from 4-13 to the Super Bowl with Drake May, that defense is great. They didn't do much, but I mean, unless they play out of their minds in the Super Bowl, they are not in the same league as the Rams or the Seahawks, which takes us to the next game. And the Rams Seahawks was as good as we could have expected. Interestingly enough, there are two things that did the Rams in. They were bad on third down, and then Xavier Smith's muffed punt. If it's not for that muffed punt, the Rams might win that game. That was the difference. The only turnover in the game, one play later, it was Jake Bobo with the touchdown. But you had both quarterbacks playing out of their mind. 346 yards and 3 touchdowns from Sam Darnold, 374 and 3 touchdowns from Matthew Stafford. You had the receivers going crazy. 9 for 165 and a touchdown for Nakua. Jackson Smith and Jegba, 10 for 153 and a touchdown. Devontae Adams had 4 for 89 and a touchdown. Rashid Shaheed had a 51-yard catch. It was an absolutely entertaining game. If you didn't want both teams to lose or want to, it was just great football to see. And what we're seeing is that, wow, that Seahawks team is freaking good, because they're not as talented. They're not as talented as the Rams, but they locked them up late. And Matthew Stafford, who has taken souls from opponents, was left on that last throw. There was literally no throw he could have made for that final play to go. That fourth down play, everyone was blanketed. There was no way for him to come up heroically.
Yeah, and they did a great job. They dropped out 9. They only rushed 2, and I think they were at the 6-yard line, 5 or 6 yard line, and really disguised things and confused Stafford. And actually, the previous 2 third and fourth and shorts, I thought they did a great job of confusing Stafford. It just opened up enough for him to run for it. And then the one where they read that screen pass like a freaking book, and he was able just to pitch it off to Puka Nakua. I mean, their defense, I mean, this was one of those situations where you look at it and obviously we know Mike LaFleur does not call the plays. That we know that. But the Rams offense was number 1 in the league in points and yards, and they did not disappoint. 479 yards of offense, scoring 27 points against the team that was number 1 in scoring defense in the NFL. And I think they were, sixth in yards against. So it's like this is maybe the best overall defense. Them and the Texans really are the best overall defense in the NFL. And it was just a ho-hum 479 yards and 4 touchdown game. And it, like you said, it came down to the fact that you had a punt returner that muffed a punt and gave a short field to Seattle that really set the difference in this game. I did have, one question, and you and I in our group text with some other guys were texting during the game, and I think we were both a little shocked that when the Rams scored that touchdown in the fourth quarter, late in the third quarter, and they got the game to 31-26. I was really surprised they didn't go for 2. I know some people will go, well, it's too early, but at that point, if you go for 2, you're down by 4, or you're only down by 5 versus 4.
Right, down by 4, down by 5 is the same as when the late game scenario.
And so, because you think about it, the next drive, they stalled out. They took forever. It was a great drive, right? Over all 7.5 minutes of game clock rolled off, and it was just a really excellent drive that ended at the 6, and they could have potentially kicked a field goal and won it, or tied it, and then forced the Seahawks to go down and do something. So instead, they ended up settling, having to go for it. And so that was an interesting decision, because here's the other thing. The Rams were able to hold the Seahawks to 1 sack and 3 quarterback hits. Like the Rams game plan to play well against the best scoring defense in the NFL was masterful. And so, like, if Mike LaFleur is involved in that, in the game planning and preparation and things of that nature, you're really hopeful that he's the guy and not Ron Rivera, right?
Yes, 100%. So we get the matchup in a week and a half of Seattle and the Patriots, which sadly I care nothing about the outcome of this game. I mean, Sam Darnold, if Sam Darnold wins, that's a great story for Darnold, and it will be a feather in the cap for Mike McDonald. But the fact that both of these coaches are leading quick turnarounds, this is an example of why Michael Bild was like, we can do it. We can turn it around quickly. Look at how they did it. It was defense. And then Seattle got lucky with Sam Darnold.
Yeah, and they did.
They got lucky with Sam Darnold.
Well, and you look at their offense, right? I mean, and don't get me wrong. I mean, Sam Darnold's a very important piece of that offense, right? 346 yards, 3 touchdowns. He had a fantastic game. But their entire offense is based on the ability to run the ball, right? Run those play actions, run those wide zones consistently, and really set things up. And you look at all of that, and he does a great job of taking advantage of that and then setting up shot plays where he's able to push the ball down the field. I was listening to somebody talk about it, and I think it was during the game, but if I'm wrong, I apologize. And they were talking about, their offense really isn't, explosive. It has explosives, right? Like, yeah. They're not looking to throw the ball all over the field. Now, he did throw the ball 36 times. Again, that's a lot. But, they're not looking to throw the ball all over the field and really, take shots down the field consistently. They're looking to consistently get, 5 or 6 yards and allow their guys to run, and then run those wide zones and then set up those deep shots, those shot type of plays. And that's what makes Kubiak's system so good, but it's also what makes it kind of, similar in a way to what we saw from Drew Petzing. It's just with, superior talent running it, right?
And now we get to watch Either the Patriots win a championship after just a few years after the dynasty was over, or get to see the NFC West win a championship and the Cardinals look like a joke. So yeah, it's just a regular everyday postseason, right?
Well, and I was talking to somebody about this today, and it was like, imagine you have to decide between cheering for your bitter rival or cheering for the team that everybody thought was done, right? Like they weren't going to be there anymore. And then they're there and you're like, oh man, they could win their 7th Super Bowl. So yeah, I mean, that's where we're at with this. This is one of those where it's like, can we just not have the Super Bowl played this year?
Yeah. But with that, that'll wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Sierra podcast, the best of our Cardinals talk on the web. We'll see what we have later on in the week. Hopefully we get to react to a new head coach, but who knows? Who knows what's happening then? That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening. As always, we'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.